days of the Obama administration, some White House officials, Obama White House officials, scrambled to spread information across the government about Russian efforts to undermine the 2016 election, including information about possible contacts between Russians and associates of Donald Trump. Was that appropriate?
From what you're telling me, and it's really kind of hard to make judgments,
I understand.
Then that also deserves further scrutiny. But again, it's hard for me to reach conclusions when you're just quoting from the latest news.
Yeah, communist sources, by the way, too.
It's understandable. On that note, let's go to another audience member. I want to bring in Anya Luberskaya. She's a student here at GW and a staff sergeant in the United States Air Force, with a question for Senator Graham. Anya.
Air power.
For Senator McCain as well.
Sure.
Good evening. As someone from the former Soviet Union whose family lived through the uncertainty of the Cold War and the nuclear arms race, I would like to ask you, Senator, to make the best case for us tonight for why the United States should consider Russia a foe, especially in matters concerning the war on terror and arms control. Thank you.
You can start, Senator.
Vladimir Putin wants to restore the old Russian Empire. He's invaded Georgia. He's invaded Ukraine. He is now attempting to affect the outcome of elections. He's putting enormous pressure on the Baltics. One of the greatest men I've ever known, Boris Nemtsov, was murdered in the shadow of the Kremlin. He was in my office. I said, Boris, do not go back to Russia. They're going to try to kill you. He said, I have to go back. A month later, they shot him and killed him in the shadow of the Kremlin. Let's know what Vladimir Putin is. He's a thug, he's a KGB agent, and he's a killer. And treat him as such. And what does he understand? Strength. That's why we have to rebuild our military, and that's why, frankly, we are not doing enough to rebuild that military and its capabilities. So all I can say is peace through strength. And I think that that's one thing that Vladimir Putin would understand.
Here's the case to the American people. If you let Putin get away with this, then we're opening ourselves up for endless attacks by foreign entities. Let us make our own decisions about who we'd like to be president. Putin hates democracy. 2 critics have died from plutonium poisoning. I don't know how many of your friends have died from weapons-grade plutonium in their drink, but these people in Russia play really hard. The Duma is a joke. The independent judiciary has been lost. He wants to break the back of the European and NATO. He hates coalitions of democracy. He dismembered the Ukraine. He's affecting the Baltics day in and day out. The democracies in his shadow are under threat. I just got back from France and Germany. He went to Syria. I went to France and Germany, which shows I'm a lot smarter than he is. The French and the Germans are scared to death about the Russians playing into their elections. The Russians are openly helping right-wing parties in these countries who want to withdraw from NATO and the European Union. Vladimir Putin is not a friend to democracy. He is a crook. I don't know what you make as president of Russia, but he's estimated to be worth between $40 and $60 billion. Either he's the best money manager in the world or he's a crook. I think he's a crook, and I wish our president, who I want to help, would stand up to Putin and say that an attack on one party in America is an attack on all of us.
Ronald Reagan dealt with Brezhnev and other then Soviet Union leaders, but he dealt from a position of strength. And for the last 8 years, we have let our defenses decline. We have cut spending on defense. We are not ready. We have 1/3 of the aircraft. Half the F-18s in the Navy can't fly right now. Marine Corps pilots are flying few hours a month than their Russian and Chinese counterparts. Air Force maintainers are stealing parts from museums in Tucson, Arizona. 2 of the 60 Army Brigade combat teams are at the highest level of readiness. That's the result of 8 years of Obama, and I'm glad the president is committed to rebuilding our military. What he said last night was not true. That is only a 3% increase. We need a much larger increase in defense spending.
Senators, I want to bring in another member of our audience, George Salo from Ohio. He owns a Ukrainian restaurant that his father started after emigrating here from Ukraine. George.
Senators, good evening. President Trump said recently that he expects the Russian government to de-escalate violence in Ukraine and return Crimea. The Budapest Memorandum on Security Assurances signed under the Clinton administration in 1994 was to protect Ukraine, including Crimea.
And guaranteed Crimea to be part of Ukraine.
Correct. If my father were still alive, he would wonder, will our government fail to keep its promises about our security to its citizens the same way as failed to keep its promises with Ukraine? And what does the United States plan to help Ukraine now?
A couple of months ago, I went with President Poroshenko to Mariupol, and we met with the frontline troops. He gave out medals to some of these brave Ukrainian Marines and soldiers that are fighting, and he gave a medal to a mother whose son had just been killed by a Russian sniper. I'll tell you, that's pretty moving, and we're not doing enough about it. And we need to help the Ukrainians. And the first thing we could do that President Trump could do is give the Ukrainians defensive weapons so they can defend themselves against superior Russian equipment. They're slaughtering Ukrainians with superior equipment, and the Obama administration wouldn't give them lethal weapons to defend themselves.
And your question is a good one. I hope people are following this. After the Soviet Union fell apart, all hell was breaking out. So we went to the Ukraine, where there were, I think, 1,200 nuclear weapons stationed in the Ukraine. And basically we said, if you'll turn those nuclear weapons back over to Russia, at the time sort of an ally, then we all, including the Russians and the United States, will guarantee your territorial integrity. What did Putin do? He stepped all over that. So why would anybody trust us in the future? And the last time somebody in Europe reached out and grabbed territory by force not belonging to them, it led to World War II. So not only should we never forgive the sanctions, relieve sanctions that exist on the Crimea, we should impose new sanctions. Don't you want Russia to pay a price for interfering in our election? I want the Russians to be sanctioned more for interfering in our election. And the last thing Trump should ever envision is relieving sanctions to reward them for taking Crimea by force, because Putin will not stop until somebody makes him stop.
Senators, we have another question over here. Kelly Bennett, her husband is in the Army and works closely with the intelligence agencies. Kelly?
Good evening, Senators. Thank you for your service. President Trump's open disdain for the intelligence community, possible ties to Russia, and his off-the-cuff manner in dealing with foreign policy issues and leaders is troubling. My husband serves very proudly, but we worry that he and others may be needlessly sent into dangerous situations due to a combination of those factors. What will you do to help avoid that type of situation?
First of all, I'd like to thank your husband for his service to our country. I would like to point out that the national security team that President Trump has assembled, I couldn't have picked a better group of people. General Mattis is revered by all who served under him. General McMaster is one of those who really was key in the Iraqi conflict in the early days. General Kelly is also great, and so he's assembled an outstanding national security team, and I'm hoping, I'm not positive, but I'm hoping that he will rely on them for the advice and counsel, because they have the respect of all of us who know anything about the military. So I'm not sure, and I can't look you in the eye and say that that's going to happen, but I am optimistic that President Trump will listen to these really brave and seasoned individuals.
And Senator Graham, as you respond, I think what Kelly was getting at was the idea that she's concerned about some of the statements that President Trump has made that could potentially put her husband in harm's way. Well,
so number one, the intelligence community, those in uniform and those who serve in the shadow, are really brave. Can you imagine what it's like to be a CIA person on the ground somewhere over there? So the bottom line is they don't get much credit because we can't talk about what they do. So I would beg the president to recognize them as the heroes they are. This team around President Trump is outstanding. The guy I saw last night can govern this country. The guy I saw last night we can all do business with. But there's one thing that we haven't talked much about. This seems to be military night. I've been to Iraq and Afghanistan with John McCain 40 times. What have I learned? You're never going to win this war through military force alone. The budget the president's proposing cuts the State Department by over 30%. That is soft power. And I will tell you, Mr. President, Obama made a mistake by leaving Iraq too soon. We begged him to leave troops. When you draw a red line, you better enforce it. When you let Assad get away with it, all hell is broken loose. So to President Trump, if you destroy soft power, those diplomatic tools that lead to holding and building, we'll never win this war. If you take off the table building a small schoolhouse for a poor young girl in Afghanistan, Iraq, or Syria to give her an education, we'll never win this war, because an education to a poor young girl is far more damaging to radical Islam than any bomb. That's got to be on the table.
After Gaddafi was After Gaddafi was killed, we went to Libya again. And we came back and said, look, the hard part begins. You got to clear the weapons. You got to enforce the borders. You have to start building democracy. We walked away. Look at Libya today. That's the example of not using the soft power after the hard power has already been used.
Can I just follow on that? In 2006, we went to President Bush. This is not working. I made mistakes.
We're talking about Iraq.
Yeah, Iraq. I didn't appreciate Iraq would be as hard as it was. Blame me. But after about the fourth visit, the first time John and I went, we were in SUV. We went downtown and bought rugs and walked around. The second time, we were in a convoy. The third time, we're in a tank. This is not getting better. So it wasn't a few dead enders. And Senator McCain, to his credit, during the presidential campaign for our party, was a lone voice for saying we need more troops in a war that everybody was tired of, because he understood you couldn't lose it, and if we don't have more troops, we're going to lose it. President Bush, to his credit, adopted the surge, and the surge did work. To President Trump, if you take soft power off the table, if you dismantle the State Department, and we don't have any tools other than military force, you'll be making the same mistake the other two presidents made.
We also told the President Bush he had to fire his Secretary of Defense.
Yeah.
On that note, we're going to have to take a quick break. Stand by, everybody. We'll be right back with more from CNN's Town Hall with Senators John McCain and Lindsey Graham.